Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is able seaman Angelina Demovska. We warmly welcome the family of Private John Joseph Kennedy, whose story will be told shortly. We're honoured to acknowledge Warrant Officer Mark Mortaboy, Warrant Officer of the Defence Force, New Zealand. We're also honoured to welcome the veterans of 5th Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment, who served with Private John Kennedy. We welcome, as always, the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Corporal John Joseph Kennedy. John Kennedy was born in Annandale, New South Wales on the 14th of December 1939, the son of John and Mary Kennedy. John attended the Christian Brothers School St. Thomas at Lewisham, but after completing his second year, he left. He held a number of different jobs over the following years, including as a builder's labourer on Garden Island. John met his future wife Patricia when he was 13. The two became a couple 2 years later and married in December 1958 when John was 19 and Patricia 18. Between 1959 and 1964, they welcomed 5 children into the world. The following year, John, who was working as a station porter for the New South Wales Government Railways, decided to join the Australian Army, which offered stable employment and a way to look after his family. At this time, Patricia was pregnant with their 6th child. On the 10th of March 1965, 2 weeks after the birth of his 6th child, John Kennedy joined the Australian Regular Army, signing on for a period of 6 years. He spent the next 6 months in training, progressing from being a recruit at Kapuka to a qualified rifleman after completing infantry training at Singleton. At the end of September, he was posted to the 5th Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment, where he joined D Company. Kennedy's leadership potential was recognized at an early stage, and in early 1966, he was sent on the first of many courses to ready him for promotion. His first promotion to Lance Corporal occurred on the 1st of March. Life in Fire RAA was busy at the battalion, had been told to prepare to deploy to Vietnam. The next 3 months were taken up by a hectic training schedule. 5 RAR arrived in Vietnam in May and had begun their first operation by the end of the month. Kennedy was promoted to temporary corporal on the 1st of August, after which the battalion conducted a clearing operation in the village of Bean Ba, a place that would become all too familiar during 5 RAR's second tour. The battalion returned to Australia in April 1967, and Kennedy's promotion to corporal was made substantive. Kennedy continued with training courses for promotion, but stopped short of completing the final subject for sergeant. He did not want to be removed from the men who he looked after with great care and pride. His diggers good naturally referred to him as Pops or Poppy. His men revered him, and even though he was only a few years older than them, his status as a father lent him a paternal and caring demeanor. In late 1968, John and Patricia welcomed a 7th child into the family. 5 months later, Kennedy deployed in Vietnam with 5 RAR for a second time. On the 6th of June 1969, D Company was the first Australian Task Forces Ready Reaction Company. Due to a large number of officers and men being on promotion courses or on leave, the company was under strength, and Kennedy was acting as a 12 platoon's commanding officer. After receiving news of Australian armoured vehicles being attacked at Bean Ba, north of Nui Dat, D Company and supporting armoured personnel carriers and Centurion tanks were sent to help the local South Vietnamese force clear the village. Although they initially thought they were facing around 2 platoons of North Vietnamese Army soldiers, the Australians soon realized they were up against a far more significant force. The men of D Company, supported by the armoured personnel carriers, Centurion tanks, and helicopters gunships of 9th Squadron Royal Australian Air Force, conducted the initial assault through the village. During this time, Private Wayne Teeling, a recent replacement to the battalion, was killed. Kennedy led his men to clear as many houses as they could during brutal and often hand-to-hand fighting. But after reaching the center of the village, they were forced to withdraw to the south. The company took part in a second assault of the village later in the afternoon. But as light began to fail, parts of Bin Ba were still occupied by enemy soldiers. Still supported by armored vehicles, D Company moved out of the village and occupied defensive positions nearby overnight. The next morning, Kennedy and his men again began to advance into Bin Ba. After finding the enemy had withdrawn during the night, the rest of the clearing was handed over to local South Vietnamese forces. The exhausted D Company returned to Nui Dat for rest. On the 14th of June, Kennedy was the orderly room corporal and had gone to battalion's West Canteen at 8 p.m., much to the displeasure of the 5 RARs attached artillery forward observers who had been trying to buy a round of beer. Kennedy explained the decision in the manner of a corporal who was on the right end of the argument. The next day, D Company was sent to Dat Do to relieve a company from 9 RAR. After arriving and taking over, D Company's commanding officer ordered his platoons to form a defensive circle in a grove of rubber trees at the southern end of the village. 12th Platoon, commanded by Sergeant Rod Lees, was given the task of occupying the 12-4 position. Lees was in the process of sitting the platoon's machine guns when he stepped on an M16 anti-personnel mine. When the dust from the ensuing explosion cleared, it was clear that 12th Platoon's headquarters group has been devastated. Corporal John Kennedy and the platoon medic Private Peter Jackson were dead. Sergeant Lees suffered severe wounds to both legs. Although he was initially given no chance of survival, he did pull through. Another 22 members of the platoon were wounded, one of whom died several days later in hospital. Nearly every man in 12th Platoon had been wounded. Engineers called to the scene located another 2 mines in the grove. One had been faulty and had failed to detonate, while the other had remained undisturbed. Kennedy's remains were repatriated to Australia and he was laid to rest with full military honours in Liverpool Cemetery. He was 29 years old. Kennedy's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, along with 521 others who died as a result of their service during the Vietnam War. A group photograph is displayed today beside a pool of reflection. Kennedy is located in the front row on the right, smiling. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Corporal John Joseph Kennedy, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in a hope of a better world.
If you're able, please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.